On this episode of Tell Me You're Joking, your favorite pop-politico pod from the Lou, I sit down with a Republican hailing from north of Delmar Boulevard. That is about as common as a Democrat with a Cybertruck, maybe less so. Robert Vroman has ran in 6 races for seats ranging from treasurer to congressman against Tishaura Jones, Daly, and Lacy Clay, to no avail. He has put his money where his mouth is by living up north, all while buying, rehabbing, renting, and selling properties in neighborhoods he describes as incredibly desolate. I get his take on why Trump won, quote, fake news, the divide between North City Democrats and Southside progressives, what he would do with the Rams money, and check this out, why he truly believes A.O.C, yeah, that A.O.C, is a viable candidate. His words, not mine. I hope you enjoy. Robert Vroman.
Hello.
So, your name is one that's kind of been like almost like a ghost in my social media world. I see it sporadically pop up, and when it does, I'm like so intrigued by the direction, the content. You're an enigma, in my opinion, in the 314 in particular. So first off, thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much.
I want to get right to it because there's so many things that I want to pick your brain on. And I want to start at the top. I want to start at the big billboard.
Yep.
Senor Donald Trump is a repeat winner. And I just want to get your take out of the gate. As a registered Republican, a ballot-running Republican in the city of St. Louis, what's your 2 cents on just kind of the generic summary from the last election?
Well, at the national level, I'll be honest, I'm a pragmatist, a realist. I was a little surprised. I thought that the cultural zeitgeist had kind of just cemented Donald Trump as the bad guy, and that we were just going through the motions, that it was just going to be the liberal center-left coalition had just completely seized control of the federal government, and Donald Trump in 2016 was a fluke. That was my pessimistic take going into it. I was pleasantly surprised that was total reversal.
Well, let me ask you, pleasantly surprised, that terminology in and of itself, were you pleasantly surprised because you were a fan of the candidate, or that you were in opposition of kind of the liberal structure or the previous power structure that you just kind of alluded to?
Right. I've never been a big fan of Donald Trump. I've not been shy about that. I don't think he's a good politician. I don't think he's a good human being. But the Democrats have not produced anything better. I do come definitely from the more libertarian side of things. I'm a cynic of all government levels. So Donald Trump, is he really running the country? Has he ever? I think it's more just like which side gets their entourage into all these places. And I would trust the Republican behind the scenes more than the Democrat behind the scenes of what's actually going to happen. So I think Kamala's an idiot. I think Donald Trump is a narcissist. I don't really like either of them, but I would take the Republican side forced to.
Did you vote, or did you sit out?
I voted for Chase Oliver.
Wait. You voted for who?
I voted for the Libertarian.
The Libertarian.
Missouri's a red state. This is my protest.
So when you do that, what does that really say, though, about the Republican Party itself? Because one of the questions I want to get into here, and maybe this is a good transition, is, the idea of the Republican Party, the party of Reagan, the party of Lincoln, right? All these old connections, as far as like when you think of a Republican, there are certain images that have historically resonated. Is the Republican Party dead post 16 and now 24 as far as like from an optics standpoint? Is it now the MAGA party, and the Republican R is now lowercase?
I think the Republican Party, obviously they're showing great strength right now. It's just, who's at the top matters quite a bit. Donald Trump is kind of this nebulous populist. I've about 50-50 on his cabinet picks so far of whether I like him or not. So, I mean, he's still drawing from the old guard, and the more neoconservative, I guess, is the slur, and also from some libertarian adjacent types. So the Republican Party, both major parties, are very nebulous things that can change cycle to cycle. So, both are showing that this country is very close. We had, I think it was 6 of the 50 states were decided by less than 1%, and Trump got like all of those. So, I mean, it was razor close, really. So neither party is going anywhere.
So what does it say to you, though, when you think of, you were talking about the Republican Party appears to be doing really, really well right now, and yet in the same breath or in the same time frame, we are seeing traditional, true Republicans, true conservatives, true pro-lifers, such as the Cheneys, such as the Bushes, such as, 42 of his cabinet members from the previous administration that are all registered Republicans for life that are saying, this is not the party that I know or want to be associated with. Where do you think the disconnect lies in, for the general public that's trying to figure out what is the Republican Party?
I think we're watching like the surface bubbles of a lot of special interest groups jockeying. You've got the military side of things that Trump has been kind of cool on, and the intelligence community, and then just all the businesses that are going to be, no matter which side wins, there's just a huge upper class of wealthy people that are going to be looking for handouts, looking for special legislation, and just the feeding frenzy in D.C., it's just this punting match back and forth of who's controlling that. And so these people who are saying, oh, the Republican Party I don't recognize anymore. Well, that's because your specific cronies are maybe on the outs right now. But the ideas that this group overall gets behind, even though they're all in it for themselves, they're all looking for their little piece of the pie. They're banking on it's going to break one or two ways, and we're going to back side R this go around in order to get what we want.
Do you think it's one of those cases, though, that is it really about backing side R because of side R, or is it because we've basically created an environment where the zero-sum game of politics, it's much easier to belittle, degrade, or diminish the other team in an aggressive manner? Because I always think of it in terms of like late night television, late night news. If it bleeds, it leads, right? Mm-hmm. Well, political strategists, that's kind of the new norm. Because especially in this last election, you're probably looking at less than 5% of the airwave time that was really dedicated to policy, right?
Yeah.
So do you think that's good? Do you think the Republican Party is, because both sides do it. I'm not saying they don't, but I think anybody with kind of an objective lens, you could say that the right side does it more. Is it good or bad?
I think it is definitely distracting. I think it may be maybe subconsciously trying to distract voters from what's really important is where's your money going. And now instead we're talking about, oh, these immigrants are going to kill your family, or the school shooters are going to go off, whichever side you're on. And these very niche, extreme cases, like you say, are dominating the airways when what really matters, $35 trillion in debt, massive amounts of taxation being pulled out of everybody's pocket. You barely hear about that.
Yeah. Define rhino. Like in the terms of this, along the lines of what we're trying to, dissect a little bit. When you hear the term rhino, how do you view that? Because I think that was another term, that was a word that was really kind of circumvented by, Republican strategists to create a new boogeyman. And I don't know if it worked or it didn't work, but it clearly assisted in primarying, quote, traditional Republicans across the country. what does it mean to you when you hear rhino?
It's a Republican that is willing to work with the Democrats, usually on spending stuff. It's a Republican that doesn't really care about free market and small business. That's my read. Is somebody who's playing the big game and is happy to work with Democrats if it gets the bill passed.
Do you think that's a good or a bad thing?
I think it's generally bad because I think most of what government does is bad. So anything that lets them work together to get more bad things done is bad.
Well, but if political parties, if they don't negotiate, if they don't actually politic, if they don't, write bills or legislation that are bipartisan, aren't we really kind of in the landscape that we're in now, in which things have, to a degree, things have grinded to a halt?
I wish they would grind further to a halt. The spending is not stopping. This is getting a little above my pay grade of how would you actually make a functional federal government. At the moment, you're right. It is, I don't see, we've gotten to the point where now, Trump there's so much weighing on all his cabinet picks. The executive branch has got so much power that, that's how, if you want to see dramatic change in 4 years, it's more likely coming from not from the Congress, from just basically the executive order kind of presidency that we've built really since 9/11, that Obama really took to extreme. So how to get Democrats and Republicans to work together within the legislature, independent of who's controlling the White House, to do something good like repeal laws, I don't know how that would be politically realistic. So maybe grinding to a halt is the best we can hope for.
Well, let me get your take then on. I want to go back to the presidential election and the results, and some of the themes or the arguments that were made in regards to against Trump outside of policy, and specifically talking about character. Because you look at certain things such as January 6th. You look at his conviction on sexual assault. You look at the statements from everybody else, all these other women that have claimed assault/rape or other. You look at the tapes, right? His own words, and the character implications. As to if any other human had done those things, 3 times, twice divorced, third wife, multiple kids, multiple women, the typical things where everybody wants to pass judgment on their neighbor, the bankruptcies. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Oh, yeah. When you add it all up, if it's somebody not running for office, and we do this all day, every day in our neighborhoods, in our schools, in our churches, in our soccer team, looking at the other parents, we love to pass judgment and claim character that is less than. Why did he get away with it on a character front?
He's a billionaire who's established himself on cable TV. I mean, he just became a household name and doesn't really matter beyond how that name came to be. It's just, if you're a name that, long before he got involved in politics, everybody in the world knew who Donald Trump was. He was just a massive celebrity. And I was unaware. Apparently he'd been talking about running for president since the 90s. He was not on my political radar until he actually announced in 2015. He's a guy that could be president, and it's just in the consciousness that he's doing something right. He's a billionaire, and he's on TV, and he's entertaining, and that's all it takes.
So The Apprentice really is where things took off for him from a pop culture standpoint.
He was effectively running for president since he got that show.
Let me ask you personally, what do you think that says about Americans in general? That we pedestal or idolize an individual that was literally created, A, from daddy's money, B, later in life, from a reality television show in which producers script the narrative to make somebody who they want us to believe they are.
I don't think it's specifically bad about Americans. I think human beings in general. I mean, you go to Russia and there's still like 50% of the population thinks Stalin was great. I mean, this is just, we're a tribal herd species, and the people that we get ingrained to trust, it's very difficult to stop trusting them.
Do you personally, when you see candidates on either side that execute or do things that are made public that, in your opinion, are of low moral character value, does that create a reaction in your own psyche in how you engage those individuals, whether it's a vote for them or a text message or whatever? Does that matter to you as somebody that has ran for office when you look at other candidates?
No, I'm a ruthless pragmatist. I remember back in high school with the whole Clinton scandal, and I was thinking, I don't care about this at all. I care about what the stuff he proudly puts in front page news is what this is what we're doing. I'm like, yeah, and that's bad. The personal stuff, politics is magnetic. Like, what was the quote? It's not that politics corrupts. It's just that it's magnetic to the corruptible. So the people who are most likely to be willing to cut those kind of corners to get what they want in their personal life also often want to get it from everybody.
Do you find it ironic, though, that we hold a character/moral standard to virtually every other environment that we operate within, whether it is what we expect from the teachers of our children, the coaches of their teams, even HOAs, right? You name it, within our own family, which is probably the highest threshold, where you have mom and dad or grandma and grandpa, right? That if they see little Johnny or Jamie doing something that in their opinion is of ill character, the wrath within those environments is swift. Why do you think that doesn't occur? Not for yourself personally. I can understand how some people can disconnect and disassociate between, quote, leading and character, but that's not how most of normal America works on a day in, day out basis.
I think it's just a personal connection. Like, you have control over your family and personal friends. That if you tell them, hey, you're screwing up, they're there to listen, whether they follow or not. But once you get it abstracted to this, 300 million people are choosing one leader, you are never going to meet this person. It's just you become. There's layers between you and them, the media and your other cultural institutions that are telling you what to do. And the message to Trump voters is that this is all exaggerated, and even if it's true, he's still a good leader, and the impact that the presidency will have on your life is more important than what this guy does in his spare time. So, and then the argument is that Trump will do a better job on that. So it doesn't surprise me, no. I mean, when you see somebody every day, you feel like, I can impact this person.
So earlier, I think you used the term neo-populist, I believe.
Neoconservative is what the more war hawk faction of the Republican Party, which...
Okay. So a term that I've heard is neo-populist, or faux populist, right? Okay. And where I'm going with this, I want to get your take on his messaging. Because the Democratic Party has been chastised by Monday morning quarterbacks for everything that occurred during the last election, as it pertains to losing its quote core, losing its quote base, that being union, blue collar, urban America. The percentages all leaned, into the Republican column as far as increases in support for Trump over traditional Democratic bloc. And I think a lot of that had to do with a concerted long-term campaign of, one, their own personal situations, because I don't think anybody would deny that the working class in America has been put to the test, for some time. But what he did in particular was lean into that, and then added on top the icing, You know what? You work so hard. No more tax on tips. If you're struggling as a bartender, no more tax on tips. If you're old and poor and can't afford your drugs, let's not fix the problem with the drug pricing, but no tax on Social Security, and all these other promises.
Yeah.
And when we look back at the first term, there were big promises that leaned into his understanding of Americans' fear, right? Immigrants in particular.
Yeah.
Case in point, that big old wall that Mexico is going to pay for, that check's still in the mail. Mm-hmm. How do you view the effect that his populist promises have on mobilizing, this swinging core of voters, and our understanding, our case study from the first administration of the inability to get those things done?
Yeah, that's kind of a mystery. That he's kind of just throws a lot of darts at the board, a lot of just whims, and tax on tips, tax on overtime. These are drops in the bucket compared to what is really how the federal government is impacting your life. Yeah, that's an effective strategy. It's just what is it, the Gilbert trot or something, where Gilbert Gallop, where you just constantly just throwing out new stuff that, whether it makes sense or not, the other team just doesn't have the airwave bandwidth to refute everything, and then the next day there's a whole new set of promises. I think people just kind of get the end result of that is people just get the idea that he's going to be doing something, and all those specifics. Obviously, in his first term, he's promised he was going to pay off the entire federal debt in 4 years, and it doubled it or came close.
It was a big number, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, I don't know why, which of those specific things maybe resonating with people. I truly do not understand the anti-immigrant paranoia. I love immigrants. I live in North St. Louis. Practically every business is run by Middle Easterners, and I'm glad for them to be here and doing stuff that nobody else wants to do.
Well, okay, so as along those lines, I have a note here that I wanted to ask you about, specifically true education or understanding versus media influence. On the right, what they'll call it is fake news, right? It's all media bias, deep state, all these boogeyman words. In spite of the fact that the number one news program is theirs, the number one, the aggregate of pod content is theirs. Mm-hmm. You name it. I mean, it's this. It was another one of those boogeyman that maybe exists, but it doesn't exist in the volume that they describe. And I'm curious, for example, and we'll get into immigration in just a little bit, but the understanding, the true knowledge that the electorate has or does not have, and where they get it from. For example, when it comes to tariffs, my favorite is yesterday there was a report that came out of one of the trending Google searches was, is Obamacare the Affordable Care Act?
Right. We're almost 20 years past that.
Yeah, right. But the point was, the moral of the story in the article that I picked up was that a vast majority of Republican voters that were polled on that issue did not know that Obamacare, that they love and can't wait to get rid of, is actually the Affordable Care Act that they love to keep them healthy. So my question is, where are we failing when it comes to news, data, facts?
That is a major challenge going forward, because you're right. There's just so much information. People have very little attention span for that kind of thing. They get a couple snippets here and there, and they form a broad worldview based on that. How to actually convince people to engage, the logic of why policy X is bad or good, man, that's a revolutionary question.
Does it frustrate you? I mean, you read, you're an educated individual, you are close to politics. When you see these headlines, whether it's on your team or the other team, how does it make you feel knowing that that's fucking not true?
Yeah, it is frustrating. It's like, if only I had the superpower to just sit everybody down and we're going to talk as long as it takes for you to understand, either I'm wrong or you're wrong, but we should really talk this out to the nth degree and get all the evidence. But, that is just not reality.
It's a perfect stop. We're going to take a quick break, man.
Sure.
We'll be right back. All right, we're back. We were just talking about facts, data, frustration in, these two ships sailing in the sea that completely somehow avoid the Titanic iceberg of facts over and over and over again. One of the areas that really blows my mind from a fundamental purist Republican libertarian standpoint, that being, and you've alluded to it earlier, that being the debt, right?
Yeah.
We are spending money at a rate that is absolutely unsustainable. And it's a matter of not when, it's which generation is going to, feel the repercussions and the implosion of, when China says, you know what, this 2.5 points, no good anymore. We won 10 points.
Yeah.
And now nobody gets anything anymore, right? And I jotted down some numbers, because it's one of those things that I know to be true because I'm kind of a nerd about it. I like to know this because I'm a little bit of a masochist when it comes to economic reality of what are we really fighting for. In 1992, our federal debt was $3 trillion.
Wow.
Right? So 8 years of Clinton, it went from 3 to 5.6. So just under double. But we're talking 2.6 trillion increase. And during that time frame was NAFTA and a whole lot of other things, as well as .com bust, Enron. There were things that occurred that shook the economy big time. 8 years of Bush, post 9/11, we go from that 5.6 to 10.3. We then have the Obama years, right? 08 through 16. Now Bush increased it by 4.7 trillion. 8 years of Obama increased it by a total of 3.5 trillion. So at a slower rate.
Okay.
We have 4 years because at the end of Obama's term, we had a federal debt of 13.8 trillion. Not good, but manageable. With normal GDP, we're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Cut spending a little bit, and we can get it back down. 4 years later, we go from 13.8 to 26.9 trillion. $13.1 trillion. Now, all the Republicans that are, I don't even know if I can call them Republicans anymore. Some of my MAGA friends that might be listening to this are going to be like, whoa, that's COVID. And no. That's spending.
Yeah.
13.1 trillion. And then now we're looking at 4 years of Biden. We go from 26.9 to 35.7, which is an 8.8 trillion increase. 4.7 trillion less than what Trump spent. So when you hear those numbers, who's to blame?
I'm the man writing the checks. I blame Trump for the 13 trillion. He could have resisted much more.
Would you mind pulling that a little bit?
He could have resisted a lot better.
Just swing it to you, be a little easier so you can get comfortable. There you go. Yeah, perfect. Thanks, man.
Yeah, I mean, Trump, like he was running for president when he was doing The Apprentice. Him being president was like he's still running the reality show, and he writes his own lines, but it's real consequences. I don't think he ever really had a strong grasp on what he was doing, and he just got effectively his entire circle was saying, "You got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this," and he just said, "Sure, blank check," and this is what they did with it. So yeah, I don't think Trump was a great leader or a great president. I think also the COVID thing was greatly overblown because they were specifically knew that Trump would botch it. I don't think if Hillary had won in 2016, I think COVID would have been treated like bird flu. It would have been, a news blip for a couple months. And because they knew that Trump would, he'd go and get in bed with all these conspiracy theorists and say dumb things, they just hammered him on it because they knew he would flounder. and the consequences were unbelievable for the economy. Because the Democrats are just playing for the win. They don't. Well, both sides are, but in that situation, the Democrats knew if we make this guy squirm, we'll get power back, and who cares if it costs $13 trillion?
I mean, that $13 trillion.
Yeah.
Like, you look at it, and the fallout. Now, look, COVID created global supply chain disaster, right? And the scary word that probably swung this election more than anything is inflation, right? And when you look at that number, 13.6 trillion, and then, oh, by the way, we can't get anything anymore, so supply and demand on normal products are going to go up because ships are stuck in the Suez Canal. We're not going to get. We don't have any more access to goods,
Right.
And it blew everything up. So my question is, and short answer is fine, root cause. Do you think anybody even knows what root cause means?
Of inflation?
Of anything at this point?
There are maybe a handful of libertarian think tanks that are on the right track.
Yeah, that was kind of a farcical question. Let's change the geography a little bit since we've completely solved the chaos of the national post-election moratorium here. St. Louis politics.
Yeah.
You are. I like to call it the blue needle and the red haystack. You've ran for office.
The other way, right?
Or red needle, blue haystack.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for correcting me. I hope I didn't offend you.
No.
You've been running for office for a long time. Different seats, different.
I think 6 total times now.
6 total times. Everything from Congress to city treasurer to state rep, as a Republican, with an address that is north of Delmar, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Natural Bridge and Goodfellow.
Okay, so my question is why?
Well, somebody's got to make them work harder. The one-party system just really irks me that there's no resistance. I mean, yeah, there's obviously internal battles between the more old guard Democrats and the so-called progressives, but the Republican Party nationally, they've got this massive hierarchy. They've got all these departments and functions, and it's just when I showed up on the scene in like 2010 in the city party, it was a ghost. There was like 8 people, and nothing had been happened for generations. So there's all this political infrastructure of titles and whatnot that give you credibility. Total power vacuum. So I got me and a bunch of my Ron Paul buddies, and we took over the party. I was chair for briefly, I think in 2014, and then Trump shows up, and then we get this huge influx of the more MAGA populist people. So that strategy was less relevant for the shaping the Republican policy, but in terms of fighting City Hall, so we did some homework. We looked over the financial reports that the candidates all have to file, and we found that basically for the state of Missouri, the St. Louis Democratic fundraising machine is what fuels their entire efforts. Like the chairman of the Missouri Democrats, you better believe, while he may technically outrank the St. Louis City Democratic chair, the state picks up the phone for the city and it follows their bidding, which is obviously the reverse on the Republican side, where the rural dominates and the urban areas are just shells. So when we got all these candidates in the city, all these Democrats that are totally monopolizing St. Louis politics, but they, ever since Trump, have had very little say on the state level. What they're doing, they're still fundraising. They have not stopped for a second of collecting this money. The city candidates are setting it up the chain to the state level candidates and trying to push out into West County. That's really the only thing the Democrats can do in Missouri right now is gain control of the suburbs. They can't get control of state level anything. They already have the inner cities. They know the ghosts out in the rural, so they're trying to take over the suburbs. And that's what the city is doing, is they're financing the march further west.
So talk to me, though, about your specific interest in or strategy in trying to be effective as a Republican in a bright blue urban, monolith that is St. Louis City. What do you realistically expect to activate or move? Or
Well, that's what I was getting at with the funding, is that while the Democrats, that is their team plan, each Democratic politician is fundamentally self-interested. And so the second they have any competition whatsoever, they stop sending that money out west or up the chain. So the strategic goal of the city party, while it would be very difficult to win any seat, even at the southwest corner where we have our best odds, it might be a generation before we even get a single board of alderman seat or a single state rep, or never. But we can force them to spend, the Democrats, to spend their money in the city, defending their own seats instead of pushing out west, which makes the state party very happy with us, that we're behind enemy lines, fighting these hopeless feudal races, but it keeps the Democrats in the city instead of in West County or in Jefferson City.
So let me ask you, though, because, there's a certain snobbery that occurs within politics, specifically from the left to the right, whenever they talk about and belittle Republicans for, quote, voting against their best interest, right? And when you look at the state of Missouri and you look at the city of St. Louis, and you look at the struggles within the city as it pertains to so many underserved neighborhoods, and the leadership that they've had literally for generations, being Democrat, right?
Yeah.
On the flip side, you can go into any rural bog down 44 or 70, pick any lettered highway, and go south or north, find the first borough you can find, and you will see the same type of downtrodden struggle, poverty, food deserts, medical deserts across the state of Missouri, just with less bright lights. So how do you write that, within your own strategic viewpoint of the better or worse of them continually voting the same party over and over with measurably low results occurring in both environments?
Well, one major difference between the rural poverty and the urban poverty is the crime. St. Louis is top of the charts for the murder rate across the country year after year, if not number one. And that barely exists in the trailer park environments. I mean, you do have some property crime and stuff, but the homicides are, St. Louis, North St. Louis is putting up like 50% of all Missouri murders every year. So in that sense, the rural voters, maybe that's their number one concern, is we don't want to turn into a war zone. And the Republicans seem to be doing the law and order thing better out here, at least. And the city, the city police, they work for Democrats. So while the Republicans tend to bend over backwards to apologize for police everywhere, the police in the city are very different than the police in the rural areas, because police work for governments, and governments are controlled by politics.
Well, but I guess my question is this, because we can, and most do, point specifically to murder rate. That lead theory, and the activation, and you look at murders in the city. If we're looking at a chart, they're going down. That
is true.
And who knows why? Maybe just kumbaya is occurring more often than we can measure. We don't know any of that. Within the rural environments, while murder rate is lower, addiction rates, meth in particular, right, it has ravaged a lot of those communities. And I think that whether it's murder or violent crime or addiction, what you're really seeing is a siphon on those communities in which education suffers, healthcare suffers, quote, family units suffer. So why can't there be more of a little bit of maybe respect for the shitty across the board. How do you view that? How do we move the needle for everybody to be self-aware of their own shortcomings, the failures within their own circles, so that we don't see these monolith voting blocks of if you're west of the Missouri River, you better vote red, and if you're if you're within Lindbergh Boulevard, you better vote blue. How do we fix that?
Man.
Yeah, and you have 2 minutes. Go.
We're in our position because those are very effective. Both sides are effective at segregating their bases and keeping them on their separate plantations. And you're right. You live over here, your entire society is voting this way. If you live further east, you're voting the opposite. How do we fix that? I don't know.
Well, let's talk about City of St. Louis, because I know that is a massive helium-filled balloon there. Let's talk about the City of St. Louis, just from your viewpoint. Your day job, as I understand it, for years, you've accumulated properties. You're a property manager,
yes.
real estate investor,
right?
Predominantly on the north side. I'm assuming you probably have a handful of properties, maybe speckled across the south or others.
I have in the past. I don't currently own anything south of Delmar.
So let me ask you this. North of Delmar,
yep.
As a real estate investor, as a resident, as a Republican north of Delmar, what would you do? Let's say you did win one of those seats. So you win the state rep seat for that area. Day one, we challenged the presidential candidates to tell us what they would do on day one in office. Assume you win. Say something crazy happens. What's day one? What do you do?
Sure. I have lots of ideas. First of all, the LRA needs to go. Just liquidate their entire inventory. This is the city land bank. They own 12,000 properties that they've accumulated from tax auctions. You get 3 years behind your taxes. They put up for auction. If anybody bids on it, that person then owns it. If nobody bids on it at all, just for the delinquent tax amounts, which can be under $1,000, then the city owns it. And they've been doing this since the 70s. And they've, 12,000 something properties. You look at Northside, you got these vast tracts of board ups. 90% of them are owned by the city, and they are super obtuse about selling them back. Once they own the asset, okay, well now they control it. They can decide what kind of development is going to happen. If you're just some Joe Schmo who's got a wheelbarrow and a sawzall, they don't want to deal with you. They talk to people like Paul McKee, who will buy 1,000 of them at once, who also ends up doing nothing with them, but their pipe dream is they eventually get some kind of massive corporate level development to just build skyscrapers all across North City all at once.
You mean, what about like geospatial?
So that's an example of one time that's worked out, which is, an island in an ocean of blight. Okay, so it's 100 square blocks right north of downtown. Okay, well, North St. Louis is 20 square miles. It goes all the way out, to Goodfellow, up to 70 and beyond. So, the NGA, I'm sure that will help that, very specific corner, put up a couple gas stations, maybe a hotel or something for their visiting workers. But
do you think, though, that those are clearly those are big, multi-million, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of investment, if not billion plus at this point. When you see that number, do you, as a resident, do you view that as, yay, that's going to help? Or do you still think that root needs are not being addressed as you see it as boots on the ground?
Yeah, I think it is a plus, but it is a drop in the bucket. They need to open the floodgates, let anybody who lives within a block of all these board ups, if you want to take a shot at this, have at it. And they're so particular about, you got to have, basically, they want you to have the full rehab budget in the bank right now when you start. You can't pay your way along to fix up this property. If you don't have 30 plus grand in the bank, or personal friends with an alderman or something, the door's shut. They reject 85% of the offers they get. So this is just one topic. The land use, freeing up all these assets that the city has been holding for no reason, just letting rot away. That would be a big one. And then just all the licensing, the business. If you want to start a storefront in St. Louis, it is a long process, and it could end up taking you 6 months. And if you don't look, if you're the kind of person who's going to open a convenience store in North St. Louis, you probably don't have a high school diploma. You probably have very little money. You got a little bit saved up from your blue collar job, and maybe you just want to get your doors open and get some inventory going, and your place is not in great shape. The city just won't let you do it. They won't let you try. And so instead, we just have all these board ups. So greatly liberalizing, I guess liberalizing is the wrong word, but reducing the regulatory regime that City Hall has and their cultural resources office that won't let you tear anything down. I personally ran afoul of that real bad. That was 2018. I bought this regular block-sized commercial building off the auction at West Florissant and Goodfellow. Unbeknownst to me, it used to have Club Imperial, a.k.a. Tina Turner's old haunts. Oh. and I mean, the roof's caving in. There's been a fire. The place is a disaster. And I just wanted to tear it down and sell it to this Middle Eastern guy who ran a beauty supply store across the street. He's like, yeah, I'd love to triple my square footage. Just get the demo permit, and I'll buy it for you at a $30,000 profit. I said, great. And then 6 months go by of me getting shut down by the city because this building, you can see daylight through this roof. 50 years ago, some pop star lives in Switzerland, used to perform there. And St. Louis said, oh, well, that's priceless. We can't let that go. That was 2018. You go by that today, it's just even worse. The roof's even further gone.
But what do they say? What do they say to you? I mean, you're one that's actually putting your money where your mouth is, and I have to believe that a big part of it is, look, you're a capitalist. Mm-hmm. You're providing for your family. That is your job. That is how you pay your bills. So approaching it from a pragmatic standpoint is also an economically motivated, in how you go about it. So when you do attempt to demo a building like that,
yeah,
how do they justify the roadblock?
We're the Cultural Resources Office, and this is, by the loosest possible definition, a cultural resource. So we're keeping it, and it's falling apart. We can turn it into a strip mall. We can get some tax revenue going, but no, you guys just want to sit on it.
Donate the brick for a dance floor. I mean, I'm with you on that because I spent a big chunk of time working on properties, primarily Southside, and even in quote the more developed neighborhoods. It's probably even a little bit worse because then you got historic review board, and it's just a nightmare. Let's talk a little bit about the current leadership and specifically the progressives, loosely termed progressives, and the aldermanic block of said progressives. Just quick summary. When you look at what they've done over the past, really since roughly 2016, they fall in line with the introduction of Trump, and I think that's one of those Newton's third law, right? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
The Bernie people,
bingo.
They were ascendant in the last 8 years, about right. They really started picking up about 5 years ago. So Central South City, like Bevo, center around there, there's used to be a block of 3 aldermen. They were all heavily tied into the unions, and they all lost within, I think, 1 or 2 cycles to these progressives. That there really is not on the Board of Aldermen now. Before it was like a plurality of union-associated aldermen.
The Joe Volmers of the world.
Right. So Joe is now retiring. He's the last holdout, and his reign will end next spring. And then that's it. And now it's all just, it's the black North Side block, the white progressive block, and then just the old guard white South Side block is a remnant. They're the ones that lost the most out of this transition.
Wait, so that's the landscape. What would you say has been the biggest impact, pro or con, of this shift?
Well, Tishaura Jones capitalized on it, which is shocking to me that she was able to claim she has progressive cred. I mean, she's from one of the biggest political dynasties in the city and is really just a status quo gear turner, as far as I can tell, but has totally rhetorically wise bought into the progressive side, and they have supported her, unfortunately. So, Lyda Crewson was not any prize, but I think Tishaura's worse. What do you think? What have they actually done? What have the progressives done? Because not that much has changed. And
that's a great place to take a break. We'll come back and we'll talk about what they have and have not done. All right, a second ago you asked me what I thought the progressives have done. I'll be honest. Having property in those districts, working with friends that have businesses that have attempted to expand and have expanded in some cases in those districts, other friends that have had businesses shutter. I would say what they have done is elevated the temperature more than anything.
Okay.
From a policy perspective, from an activation standpoint, from a development standpoint, anybody that has attempted to really either invest their own money or work with the city to develop, whether it be residential, commercial, or otherwise, it's been more of a nightmare.
Really?
I think that the cultural litmus test as far as who you are as a potential resident, as a potential business owner, there's become a lens. I hate to say you're going through the woke test, but if we're going to be honest with ourselves, that's what it is. That's what it's been. So the turnover, or I should say the momentum, take Cherokee, right?
Yeah.
Cherokee's a perfect example. Me and my guys, actually, we were the ones that renovated foam for my glow deck first.
Okay.
That was when the first liquor license was issued on that side of Cherokee, because the previous alderman was like, nope.
Craig Schmidt, yeah, I hated him.
Bingo, right? And the first one fell, others came. And all of a sudden, Cherokee's really picking up steam. But then it stalled out, because you start to hear the anti-gentrification arguments and the well, who's going to be owning these, and who's, and it's like, oh my God, guys, this is short-sighted.
Right.
So I think more than anything, I can't point to any one thing that they did specifically that is measurable that was a fail. I think it's more of an overall brand identity, an unwillingness to be open, encourage other ideas / brands of businesses into their beloved backyards that have a predisposed or predetermined cultural litmus test.
Okay.
Now, all that being said, is it better? I would say it's neutral.
I kind of tend to agree. Kara Spencer now is running for mayor. I do think that she was more of, you obviously much more tied into that specific neighborhood than I am. I have hung out a fair amount on Cherokee, but I feel like she was kind of instrumental in the build-up of Cherokee in the last decade.
I think that she also has a little bit more of a pragmatic bone in how she approaches it. She does have relationships with a number of the developers, Jason Dean, Will, et cetera. There's an understanding of what they've been doing and the value that those properties bring to said neighborhood. But I think that, you know what? Let me tell you what I think the progressives have done from a negative perspective, from a negative standpoint, is they have isolated the city of St. Louis further away from its old ally, that being St. Louis County.
Okay.
And I think that's more from a brand identity, from identity politics to a large degree. Right, wrong, or indifferent. I think that is a byproduct of the post-progressive swing in St. Louis politics. How do you view it from the landscape of the north of Delmar line?
They're not really making a dent up there. The north side's the same old, same old. You find very few of the white liberal progressives that are coming up north to do anything. When they do, they make a big show out of it. But the board ups just keep coming.
Well, you are clearly not an African American man. I mean, you live in an African American neighborhood.
I get along fine with my neighbors.
And here's my question for you, because so much of the narrative that does come from the progressives that live on Shaw Boulevard or on South Grand, off South Grand in Tower Grove Heights, really paint a picture in which they are vehemently dedicated to improving the lives in the neighborhoods and the quality of life for those that are more downtrodden, specifically north of Delmar.
Yeah.
Do you see a connection between the rhetoric and the activations?
None whatsoever. I mean, there's some development that very little. Van Vendors had a couple complexes built, stuff. And I think that is often federally subsidized, or it is truly just corporate money. So I don't know what the progressives think they're doing. They might, we've got some nonprofit that's got to run a soup kitchen on this corner. I mean, this is 20 square miles. All I see is more buildings torn down and more buildings boarded up.
So let me give you a scenario, kind of the keys to the car, and another opportunity to lay out an idea, and that is when it comes to the remaining ARP money and the RAMS money in particular. Let's combine it roughly to $500 million, $750 million, whatever the number is.
Yeah.
What would you do?
Pay off the bond debt. We are $2.5 billion in bond debt, and we're paying interest on that. Just pay it off. Just pay off the bank and try to get our financial house right. Stop spending in the future. We already owe the money. We've already spent that $7.5 billion.
So how would paying off the bond debt help accelerate any development?
I mean, not directly, but it would. We are taking. They're collecting taxes, and some of that is being paid on interest, and some of that is being spent on services. Okay, well, if you pay off the bond debt, well, then the amount of money you're spending on interest goes down, and you can either charge less taxes, which would be great, or you can provide more services.
For the sake of our discussion, let me take that as an option off the table.
Okay.
You get $750 million, and you're tasked with spending $1 of that money into some form of program / infrastructure / development. Where do you start, given your view on the ground? In their idealistic north of Delmar, dream is really how I mean,
is this my money to spend that I have to spend in North Delmar, or I'm a bureaucrat that's spending?
You're a bureaucrat that has $750 million, and you have to spend it north of Delmar. Where do you spend it?
Oh my gosh. Maybe the riverfront. Maybe try to get some more businesses in, like the totally desolate North Broadway. That's just not my system. I would just give it back to the taxpayers would be what I'd want to do with it.
Well, but the majority of people that live north of Delmar are not the taxpayers that have paid in.
That's true. And then the reason why development isn't happening up north Delmar is more that it's cheap to get land up there. That's why I'm able to do what I do. I buy houses for $1,000, $2,000 all day, which are often in bad shape. But it's the restrictions that the city hall puts on it is why people aren't starting those businesses. So just doing it for them. I mean, I don't trust the government to spend $1 billion on starting a bunch of businesses and having them last more than a couple of years. I mean, if you've seen the Old North development they tried, they did a whole nice little couple blocks of storefronts, and now it's down to 10% occupied again after 5 years.
Why do you think the occupancy dropped so fast? Is it purely
it's not convenient to get to. It is a small island of kind of gentrified, surrounded by utter desolation. It's hard to get people to go out of their way to go there. It's not a great location.
So let me come full circle.
You need to maybe start closer to downtown.
So let me come full circle a little bit then, because when I hear you describe Old North in particular, like what you just said, you have this, 4, 5, 6 block strip of gentrification, and cool new container homes with art on the side, surrounded by, in your words, utter desolation.
Yeah.
You personally, why? Why do you continue to invest in that side?
It's a niche. I mean, it's just nobody else is doing it. I mean, I could buy a house for $1,000.
Well,
sell it on a payment plan.
But you take it a step further because you live in the middle of what you're kind of describing as politely as pseudo war zone.
I live in the Mark Twain I-70 industrial neighborhood, which is very awkwardly named. Which is I definitely did my homework. It is an island of calm in North City. So that's one of the few. If that neighborhood didn't exist, I probably wouldn't have moved north. And it was really just, I'm obviously a risk taker. It was just more convenient to live closer to all my investments.
Yeah,
I used to live in Shaw, and believe me, it was the day when I moved north. The final straw was the Kings Highway Bridge when they shut that down. And
oh my God, I remember that.
Yeah, so it turned my commute. It like tripled it, and really it was like usually I'd be going to 2 or 3 properties a day. And now I'm lucky if I can get to one in a timely fashion. I was like, screw it. If I'm going to run this business, I have to live north of Delmar. And that's why I moved. And I found the best neighborhood, and I moved there.
Did you just stand and stare at yourself in a mirror and say, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?
I remember when I first started in 2010, I was like, I'm willing to go up there during daylight and scout around and do some work. But in no way will I ever go there after dark. And then soon enough, 6 years later, I'm living there.
Yeah.
I mean,
have you seen improvement?
Not really. The neighborhoods that are hanging on, but most are getting worse. I remember, I've been doing this now for 14 years, and I can remember, okay, there used to be like 10 houses left in this block, and now there's 5, and the only new construction is happening like right above Delmar on like Enright.
Yeah.
And the first couple blocks.
Yeah, right around the corner here.
Yeah.
Let me close this out here. I'm really curious your take on Missouri from a broader perspective. That being kind of the anomaly in so much that when you look at Missouri voters, we have provided for 20 years a supermajority red state. Mm-hmm. Republican governor, Republican AG, House, et cetera, et cetera. The federal number is really 55-45. Right. It's a 10-point swing. But yet when we put ballot initiatives on the ticket, weed, mm-hmm. Abortion, minimum wage, expanding Medicaid, sports betting, all of these things that are fundamentally like anti-Republican, policy, right? They don't do drugs, pro-life, free market, no increase in minimum wage. In fact, we want right to work. You go on and on and on. Why is it that Missouri continues to, when given the chance, its people will say, we want more liberal rights, but yet we continue to vote in the exact opposite as leaders?
So you're a little bit mistaken on the history. Missouri was blue governor executive branch up until 2016. So the executive branch of Missouri was almost entirely Democrat for all of Bush, all of Obama.
Well, there's Missouri is the litmus. What is it? Ever since 1880. The whichever direction Missouri voted on the president, that we were the litmus. We got it right all the way up until 2016.
Well,
or no, sorry.
2020.
Yeah, sorry.
Biden is right.
Correct.
So Missouri is much more purple than people think, and up until 2016, we had a Democratic executive branch. There's a deep, South County used to be deep blue, Union Town, and
Correct.
now have flipped pretty red. It's just, I think there's been generational shift and exactly on the margins, particularly in the white lower class of Democrat versus Republican, and that Missouri is not a blood red state. maybe you just want to just say it's all just gerrymandering, that we have effectively turned a 55% vote margin into 75% control of the Congress people and 2/3 of the Missouri Senate and 100% executive. I mean,
I was gonna ask you about that because you hit it on the head. You would agree that when we look at the national federal election numbers, we are a 55-45 plus or minus 1 or 2 points here the last 3 elections, basically.
Yeah.
But yet we have a Republican House that has repeatedly pushed for a 7-1 map. We have 8 reps, right?
Yeah.
And it landed on 6-2. That's 75%. But yet they actually only pull 55% of that big ticket vote.
I would say I give credit where it's due. The Missouri Republican Party is doing a good job. They're punching above their weight class. They have achieved more electoral success than really they deserve.
Well, let me push on that a little bit. Is it a good job that they are effectively gerrymandering? Because if we believe in true representation,
a good job from their own perspective. They are delivering to the people that are their membership more than what is expected.
As a Republican who acknowledges that fact, would you be okay with a 5-3 map?
I prefer the 6-2. I am a Republican. I think that the Republicans are on net doing a marginally better job than the Democrats. A 7-1 split is a mathematical fantasy. You cannot divide the state into those. There's just no way. So I was definitely against that. So the 5-3 would become, basically Ann Wagner is the only thing that's close to a swing seat. If somehow the Democrats took West County, and now her district includes like all of St. Charles, I think, and like Franklin County.
Oh yeah, well, so I'm in that district, and it has been they put pencil to it. I mean, it is a snake to ensure that she's not a threat. And the irony is, I've lived there 19 years. You know how many town halls she's had? That would be 0.
Okay. I have been to an Ann Wagner event. She is a very polished political automaton. She can just rattle it on.
I would love
to talk to 5 minutes or 5 hours. She's got you.
I would love to see it.
Okay.
Because she doesn't come out in public with people that are purple.
Yeah, this was a deep base rally. I don't know, a long time ago.
So, final question. We've talked a little bit about maybe my impression of the Republican Party shifting into, quote, the MAGA Party, and the leader is clearly Donald Trump.
Yeah.
When we look forward to 2028, when whatever happens, and his second term is done, gone, see ya. Mm-hmm. If he makes it that long, because he's a little elderly. Are we looking at a big void? Because when you look at the batter's box within the Republican Party, it's not J.D. Vance. It's not. Trump has this unique, I hate to say it, like a je ne sais quoi, right? A brand that every time anybody's attempted it, including DeSantis.
Yeah, he botched that.
Right. And he was the golden child. He was the one that many wanted to beat Trump. And he wasn't even close as far as selling that brand identity. Do you see maybe a little bit more return to, I hate to say normal, maybe sane, maybe a touch more respectful? Or do you think that this environment is just going to boil up another skim off the top?
That is a really good question. And I think Trump has certainly made it more of a mystery with his kind of split picks so far with cabinets. He's got, the more libertarian side, Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, and I hesitate to say Matt Gaetz, but many people say that he's more on the libertarian side. Versus like Marco Rubio, who are just steadfast neocons. So he's all over the place. I would love to see, I like Rand Paul, Thomas Massey, those kind of guys who are not the super power players in the mainstream. I really don't want it to be Rubio. who I'm worried about.
Well, let me force your hand. You are gun to your head. Your hands are tied, and you have to choose a Democrat to lead in good faith, moving forward, moving out of the Clinton years, moving out of the Biden years, out of the bullpen that the Democrats are starting to kind of slowly percolate. Names such as Buttigieg or Bashir out of Kentucky, or Allred down in Texas. And he loses Texas, but I think he does better from a national perspective.
Gavin Newsom.
I mean, who beats him in a debate? You know,
my pick, what I would not necessarily what is most strategic for the Democrats, who I would like most to see, is A.O.C. I think she's the only one that can. If you're familiar with the ideological Turing test, can you speak your opponent's words in a way that that opponent would think you're actually one of them? And many people can't do it. They just have these caricatures of what their opponents are like in their head, and it becomes obvious when they try to explain what they think. She does a pretty good job. I think she is a actually somewhat intelligent person. She's the only person who's mentioned having common cause with libertarians by name. She has said that on the surveillance state stuff, some of the drug war stuff. I think she is the most honest. Actually believes the good of the progressive side that I happen to agree with.
I legitimately have smoke coming out of my brain right now in amazement that out of all the names, I would have came up with 99 other names than A.O.C. And I never really thought about it that way because she does have this little bit of, number one, she's got piss and vinegar. Mm-hmm. She's tough. You kind of when you watch her speak, it's hard not to like her a little bit. She just has a brand, right?
Yeah.
And she does have a little bit of that Bernie in her from a populist standpoint. But I never really thought about kind of the libertarian angle, and that's true. I don't know. And the reality is she's young.
Yeah.
So if she were to slowly percolate into a potential, maybe.
I think she has everything that Kamala had going for her with the identity side, plus some actual ideas, and not all of them are horrendous. Some of them are.
Well, does any of them have actually all tremendous ideas?
Well, no.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you want to start getting talking about third parties, but Republicans. I said Paul Massey would be my top picks. Mike Lee I could settle for. I'd have to look at an actual list.
Yeah. Well, dude, this has been fun, man.
Sure.
I really appreciate you taking the time. I'll bring you back because I'm sure there's some other people I'm sure they're going to have opinions that are exactly the opposite of yours, and I think you have the right and the street cred to point out the opposite side. So, best of luck, dude, with the property. How many properties are you up to right now?
I currently own 13. That is way down. My height was over 30 in 2017. COVID almost bankrupted me. Just to finish on that, I got crushed because the eviction moratorium, and then all these blue collar. Most of my tenants are janitor down at River City Casino or something that gets laid off. My income fell by over half in the 2021 heavy COVID era.
And I'm assuming City Hall didn't really help you?
I don't know, they didn't. And also, they're like, oh, we got all these handouts, blah, blah. It's my tenants have so little wherewithal to interact with, to fight their way through all these bureaucracies. I had one person get the handout rent assistance out of over a dozen.
Well, honestly, this is going to sound cliche. Keep fighting the good fight, man. Because, I mean, I know these properties, too, and it's they are beautiful. There's potential. When you zoom out in your brain, do you just imagine, 1950 St. Louis and parks packed and
900,000 people? Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, dude, thanks for joining, man.
Sure.
We'll catch you next time.
All right, thanks a lot. Bye.